And
all right, thanks, Terry. Welcome, everyone, to our first meeting of the new fiscal year. I'm Matt Berrien. I'm our new ACG Kentucky president. So this is my first meeting presiding as president. Want to take a moment just to highlight our chapter sponsors and our table sponsors. The programming you all have access to would not be possible without them. We've got a lot of long-time both chapter sponsors and table sponsors. And thanks to everyone. And next month, we'll be featuring our annual ACG Deal of the Year event. This is an annual event where we honor companies who made significant deals in the area. This is something we typically do in the spring, but because of COVID environment, we bumped it out to the fall calendar. So looking forward to that, and our partners with Frost Brown Todd will be presenting that. In November, we'll be featuring Middle Ground Capital. Middle Ground is a private equity group that has a significant presence in Lexington, Kentucky. Just finished a fundraise earlier this year and have been really active with portfolio and add-ons. So look forward to hearing about their investment approach and maybe some of the deals they've been doing here recently in and around the area. And then in December will be our annual joint event with FEI. Financial Executives International is a group that we partner with closely. There's a lot of joint membership, so we try to do an annual event with them. That'll be a virtual format this year as well. Nailing down final programming there and a date, so look for that to follow. And then last, before we kick into programming, just want to take a minute to highlight our ACG membership. In addition to our sponsors, the way we're able to continue to function as a chapter is by engaged members. So I want to take a moment just to highlight membership. That gives you access to our local, our national events. That also gives you some discounted access to Mid-South Capital Connection and Intergrowth. As well as our emerging leaders programming. So we've included a URL there, but also if you're interested in membership, feel free to reach out to Terry or myself as well. At this point, I'll kick things over to Brad Smith to introduce our speakers for today. Brad is our outgoing president, longtime member of the group as well. So Brad, I'll kick it to you.
Again, thanks, Matt. And, I'm excited with Matt's leadership taking control of the chapter. For those that have been with us in the past, just before we kick off the speakers here, Matt led our new initiative last year for the chapter with our young executives and launching that. So provide a lot of energy and growth. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that happens over the next 2 years under his leadership with the broader chapter. So I get the pleasure of introducing and then somewhat moderating today's speakers that I'm really excited that they've invested some time with our chapter. Mike Davis, the founder, and Jeff Byal, the CFO of Appriss, coming today and sharing some of their story and the journey that I think is very applicable to what the ACG chapter is all about in the ecosystem around private equity. So I'm going to ask them individually to just give a brief introduction of themselves, and then we'll kick in and learning more about Appriss and where they're at, where they've been, and some learning moments I think that they'll share with us during the course of the day. So Mike, maybe I'll kick to you to start with just a brief introduction of yourself.
Great. Great. I'm Mike Davis. Pleased to be here today. Thank you guys for having us in. We love telling a little bit more about our history here in Louisville. I'm a Kentucky guy, Louisville guy, public education, went to U of L speed school for a while, and then launched a couple of companies that didn't go very far. But in 1995, we myself and another speed school graduate, Young Nguyen, who I had been working with, launched this business, and we were the founders, and we look forward to telling you a bit more about the story. I've been the CEO of the company up until August 3rd, and a few weeks ago we transitioned that to, I'm now an executive chairman. I'm learning what that job's all about. It's a bit different, and every day I've walked into work for the last 25 years, I've had to learn how to do this job, so this is nothing new for me. But our new CEO, Chris Sastry, is a terrific guy. We're excited about that. And I'll let Jeff tell you a little bit about him. So,
good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be on the call today. Jeff Byal. I am a boomerang with Mike Davis here at Appriss. I was early on in the company. I joined the company as their 7th employee and was here for about 5.5 years. Left for 15 years and very wisely came back in 2016 to a very, very different company on a very different trajectory. So my background is I've been a CFO for about 23 years, primarily in private equity-backed companies, including a public company, but focused around companies kind of $400 to $1 billion in revenue. So glad to be here, Brad. Thank you.
Well, thanks for both of you all to invest some time. I know you all aren't on the normal speaking circuit, so to take time and invest with us and share more of your story, and maybe that's a great segue into kicking this off. You know, some people, Mike, obviously know a little bit about the company, but maybe share a little bit of the overview about who Appriss is, so we have that understanding.
Right. Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. To start with, you know, our company is a Louisville startup. I mean, we started literally with 2 of us in a basement, and to build a platform for the city of Louisville to address a problem in 1995 that was about a domestic violence murder that had happened here in Louisville. A young lady named Mary Byron. And she was horribly murdered by an ex-boyfriend, and the city wanted to address it. And we were 2 entrepreneurs who built some software and hardware in the very beginning to build a system. And so we've been private equity backed from the beginning, because after that first customer, we decided to quit our jobs and start a company. And Chrysalis Ventures was our investor. And so that was our humble start. And, you know, I think there are so many companies in Kentucky and in this region who start in that way. And we've come a long way in 25 years, all by growing within that ecosystem of private equity as we've transacted multiple times and brought in additional investors and capital. And today, the company has got about 1,000 employees worldwide. We've got offices, while we remain headquartered in Louisville, we've got offices in multiple locations in California and several other locations in the U.S. We've got a London presence. We've got a Warsaw presence. So it really has become a bit of a global company. Revenues north of a couple $100 million in revenue with really strong EBITDA margins. And I think what I'm proudest about is 25 years of consecutive growth. You know, we grew through the dot-com bust. We grew through the mortgage meltdown. We've grown through COVID. And we continue to kind of have a commitment to growth. And I think that's an important thing for any company. That forces you to make lots of hard decisions as you grow along the way. You have to realize what your limits are and how you bring others in that can get you past a lot of hurdles. We believe in 2019, we became kind of Kentucky's first technology unicorn, where our last transaction, we brought in investors that valued the business at just over $1.25 billion. And that's a milestone to get to that's we're very proud of. We're also proud that every single year that the Fast 50 has been offered, which measures, you know, private high growth companies, we are the only company that's been able to make that list every year it's been out there, 21 years in a row. And it measures year over year revenue growth over a 3-year window. And that's, you know, that percentage to make that list gets harder as you reach a couple $100 million in revenue than it was when you were a couple million in revenue. So that's something we hope to be able to continue to do for a few more years. So if you look at the company, Appriss, really what we are and what we've evolved to be is a data and an analytics business, you know, and we started out to solve a problem around victim notification. And the way we had to solve that problem was to go out and monitor everyone who's being arrested and going in and out of jail all across America, and watch that data so closely that when someone was being released, we could within moments notify a crime victim so they knew about it, so that we could prevent a murder like what happened to Mary Byron here in Louisville in 1993. And so originally we thought we were a victim notification company, but within a few years we realized the hard part of what we were doing was collecting and linking and managing that data underneath. And then we really became an interesting company when we realized that same data could solve other problems, right? And we began to help law enforcement catch bad guys, and we began to help solve other problems. And I'll tell you a bit more about that story in a minute. But as a data company, we're a bit different than many that you hear about. Everyone hears about Google and and Apple and Facebook and LexisNexis and all these companies that have massive amounts of data. And we certainly are probably the least known data business on the planet. We have billions and billions of records about data. But our mission is to focus our solutions on making the world a better place. We don't try to sell you something. We don't try to change who you vote for. Everything you're going to see we do is about keeping you safe or keeping you healthy, or in some ways making the community you live in a better place using those data in a legal and compliant way. So we're really a company that's focused on, you know, all of our constituents, our employees, our customers and the problems we're solving from them, and of course our investors, who we have to always continue to focus on as well. So that's kind of who we are. If you flip to the next slide, I'll let you know the primary things we do, if I try to boil it down, is we tend to take all this data and we use it to make some type of real-time decision. That could be to tell a victim that someone got released and help them figure out what they're going to do to stay safe. It could be to get information to law enforcement so they can identify someone who's just stepped over the lines and needs to be dealt with. It could be helping identify fraud. It could be helping make a real-time decision at a point of sale. We identify drug diversion or addiction. So at the end of the day, we've organized around 3 broad markets. And in one, we're about preventing crime and helping to save lives. That's in what we call our insights business. It's about workplace safety. It's about law enforcement support. It's about people's safety. The second is around fighting addiction and substance abuse. And you're going to see we have a very prominent role in the opioid crisis. We've played a very major role in driving down domestic meth lab production, things of that nature. And finally, in our retail sector, we're mitigating financial fraud that occurs within retailers on a global basis, helping them identify loss and fraud within their workforce, but also within their customer base. So, you know, these are the themes that we tend to build product around in our company. And I'll walk you through a little more about how those all appeared and how they connected in our story. So we can move on. You know, our customers we work with originally were public institutions, primarily government, state, local, federal government agencies. But today we have Fortune 100 companies. We have companies in 45 countries that use our services. And then a lot of distribution partners. Some of those very data companies you have heard of, like Thomson Reuters and Equifax and Lexis and First Advantage and TransUnion. These are all companies that use Appriss data and services as they build their products as well. So we have lots of partners that use the data and analytics that we build out. I'll give you a few more specifics here in a moment. But let's move forward and I'll tell you a little bit more about how we got here, because I think this is important. In '95, we were in a basement. We've got one customer, and we decided we want to make a business run at it. And at that time, our investor, so that we could quit our day jobs, was Chrysalis Ventures. They invested about $350,000 and bought a third of our equity. And that gave us the capital to go stop our day jobs and go try to find customers for that first program, victim notification, that we were selling. And, you know, those first few years were our struggle years. That's when Jeff came along, and, you know, he was a young new CFO, and he invented all kinds of things like March 37th to keep our books open.
Those are the days when you're trying to...
Back before we had audits, right? Everybody put their fingers in their ears, right?
Those are the days when you're trying to, you know, get contracts signed so you can borrow and make payroll on a Friday.
Yeah, I mean, we went through all of those years that most struggling companies go through, where we managed cash very tight.
Putting travel on our personal credit cards.
Yeah, we did everything, every trick that anybody's ever done, we did when we survived those first few years. Our customer base was slow to grow because they were government, right? And so even though we had a solution and a product they liked, we were government. And those first few years, we really focused. And I think that's important for a lot of businesses. They tend to, out of desperation sometimes, or just out of entrepreneurial zest, they invent that first thing, and then they quickly see the second, third, and fourth. And before they know it, and before they've really got their feet under them, they're chasing 6 things, right? And so many companies, I think, do that. We really were laser focused on solving that victim notification problem in the late 90s. And it was about 5 years before we really started doing a second thing, which was to take the data we were collecting and go build products for law enforcement. And law enforcement wanted to know who was coming and going. They wanted to know how to track sex offenders that were being arrested. And we built a series of products that we could then go sell to them. The smartest thing we ever did was, and I think we were ahead of our times, is we invented our business with a commitment to recurring revenue. So at a time in the mid-1990s where companies were selling software and they charge you $1,000 for a software package and $100 a year for a maintenance agreement, we were going after subscription revenue. Everything we delivered to our customer, we wanted what today is called a SaaS model. Back then, we just said, hey, we're going to lease you the platform. You're going to have an application service provider relationship with us. We're not going to just sell you the software, right? And so every product we launched back then was about that. And so up until 2007, we stayed with Chrysalis, was our only investment, our only outside equity. In 2000, we brought a couple of regional firms in, 5 years in, to help Chrysalis. But it was about 2000, we had put about $10 or $11 million of capital into the business, right?
We did our Series B in 2000.
We did our Series B 5 years in.
Brought in Richland Ventures from Nashville and CID from Indianapolis.
And there was
David Grissom.
David Grissom joined the board.
Right.
And yeah, I think those were the three groups that
yeah.
came in. And at that time, the company was probably doing about 8 or 9 million of recurring revenue, and we had 80 people. And what we really were investing into in 2000 was the .com era. Everybody was throwing money at anything on the internet. And we did foolish things. We spent the next year launching all kinds of ideas and products that we knew nothing about. And
blew through a lot of cash.
Blew through a lot of cash. And we did that in markets we didn't understand. And we did it right into the .com bust. So by early 2002, the world looked very ugly. Nobody was spending on new things, and we kind of retrenched. And in 2002, we went to our board and we said, look, we can keep spending and trying all these things, but we're going to blow through the rest of the cash. And what we think we should do is go back to what's working, which is the original products we built around victim notification, put our heads down and keep growing and get this company profitable again. So we went from, break even, slightly profitable to cash flow negative when we took that investment. And about 18 months later, we went back and put the company where it was going to be profitable again and focused on victim notification. Put our heads down in 2002, and 5 years later, we had grown the business from 9 million to, 40 million, 43 million, something like that. We were doing about 8 million of EBITDA, and we sold the company then to Bain Capital Ventures and JMI for about $127 million. And it was a great return for all of our investors that had come in. And we really then escalated the company up into what I would call the next level, kind of what I would call the B-level players in mid-market private equity growth with Bain Ventures and JMI. And they were great partners. By then, we had begun to have our law enforcement customers ask us to go solve another problem. In 2007, we were starting to focus on meth lab production. And what was happening is, if you ever saw Breaking Bad, people were going around to pharmacies and collecting and stealing cold medicine and cooking meth in the back of their car, in the hotel room, in their house. And it was the number one drug problem in America at that moment. And so our law enforcement customers asked us to figure out how to track and identify who was diverting that method. So we launched a product in 2007 that was going to go statewide. Kentucky was our first state, and we were going to require everybody who bought that product to show their ID and put it into a database where we could see who was out collecting lots of it. So many of you have probably bought that product, those cold medicines that have pseudoephedrine, and you've had to show your ID at a pharmacy. That is Appriss, who takes your ID nationwide. We track all of it in the country right now. And we identify who you are and how much cold medicine you've been buying lately. And if you're within the legal limit, you don't even know it. It's like having a credit card approved. You just get your box approved and you go off on your merry way. If you exceed the legal limit, the pharmacy's going to tell you they can't sell you that box. And if you keep doing things that make it look like you're trying to exceed the legal limit, eventually you show up on a radar for law enforcement to look into. And we launched that product in 2007, and by 2011, we had driven domestic meth production in America down by 80%. It's now mandated by law in about 38 states, and we track almost all of it sold in the country through every major chain. So that brought our company into a new world. We had these new investors. We invented a new way to sell, because up until 2009, we had never sold to anybody other than the government. We suddenly had pharmacies that were our customers and pharmacy manufacturers who were paying us. And we were coming right into the heart of a window in 2008 when the world was really getting tough. And we had invented some new ideas and some new customer bases, and that was a good thing for us. So our Bain and JMI investors were with us for several more years. By 2010, we had been reached, because we were tracking all this cold medicine, the pharmacy industry came to us and asked us to begin to engage on the opioid crisis and figure out if we could help identify ways to drive that problem down. We did that, and over a period of a few years introduced a national way to link all of the state's data that's being put out on who's distributing controlled substance prescriptions. Anything that requires a doctor's prescription being managed, if it had a narcotic component, was being centrally managed by each of the states, and we became the hub that brought all that data together. And that data allowed us to build analytics so that doctors, as soon as you walk into a hospital, could identify all of your prescriptions all over the country and do a quick analysis to determine if you have an addiction problem start to show up, right? And that began to change prescribing habits. And while in COVID we are seeing an increase, over the last 3 years, we've seen a decrease in declining prescriptions towards these addictive products to the tune of 30+%. In the last 2 years, we've seen for the first time overdose deaths of prescription narcotics coming down in this country. A lot of that because we have now linked every single state database into a national network. That data is being used by about 1 in 3 prescribers on a daily basis, billions of records being managed on a yearly basis, so that doctors can identify where they have high risk and help those patients get to treatment and support. We're very active in that space, all within what we call the Appriss Health team. By 2014, our JMI and Bain investors had been in. They paid about $127 million for the company. They were ready to come out of their fund. We put a book out and brought in Insight Partners, which is one of the top software companies and investors in the world. At that time, they were managing a $5 billion tech software fund, where we had come from investors who had been investing out of like $700 million funds, so another step up into the major leagues. Today, those same investors manage $10 million funds when they raise a fund. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of money they're putting together.
They're oversubscribed.
Yeah, and they're always oversubscribed.
Amazing.
But this investor group came in at a time where we were launching into kind of a third space, right? Because of the healthcare work we've done, we suddenly had 100,000 pharmacies around the globe that were connecting their point of sale into our data network. And some of them were asking to solve other fraud problems within their workflow, anti-money laundering and things like this. And so our new investors, Insight, came in and said, let's focus on that as a space as well. And the third thing they asked us to do is focus on acquisitions. We'd never really been accretive. We had done most of our growth organically up until that point. And within the first year Insight was here, we went out and bought 2 or 3 companies, a couple of them in the retail space to focus on retail fraud and crime. And today we have a retail division that has more retail data about purchases than any other company on the planet. We get billions of records a day. If someone in Oklahoma buys a cooler from Walmart, we know about it tomorrow. And all these retailers give us their data so we can help run analytic models to help them predict fraud and risk occurring within their employee base or within their customer base, right? We're helping them drive down their risk and fraud through those models and those products. So that kind of became our third market segment. You see data today. So when I talked about safety and people safety, working with law enforcement, public safety, and workplace safety, that's Appriss. Every Uber driver, every Lyft driver in America is monitored nightly by Appriss to see if they've been arrested. And if they get arrested, we tell Uber about it the next morning. That's one of the types of things we do to try to increase safety, right? That's all within Insights. Health is all about drug diversion, substance abuse, keeping people healthy by fighting the crisis of addiction we have in our country. And then this retail group is all about driving fraud out of retail. And we've really built strong market positions in all of them. Insights is our largest business. Health is probably our fastest growing business. Retail is our business that is probably most unique, but it's the one that's going to struggle in the middle of COVID. All 3 of these businesses are growing, but retail feels the pinch the most because of the customers and what's happened to them through COVID, and we're feeling that. But when we look at it, the themes that are unique, is gathering hard-to-find data and then using that data to build solutions to attack a problem that fits the mission of Appriss, and our mission is knowledge for good. We're not gathering data just for the sake of gathering data. We're not doing it to go out and just make a buck. We're doing it to solve some kind of problem that makes the world, frankly, a better place. And that's kind of how we built the company. So that's our story today. The last transaction we did was our investors who came in 2015, Insight Partners, brought in another world-class private equity group called Clear Lake Partners out of is it Santa Monica? Yeah, Santa Monica is where they're headquartered. And Clear Lake bought 50% of the common equity of Appriss at a $1.25 billion valuation. I think Insight paid $350 million when they bought it. So if you think about it, we were valued in 2000 at $25 million. We were valued at 95 at $1 million. That was when Insight Chrysalis invested. We were valued in 2007 at $126 million. We were valued in 2014 at $360 million. And we were valued in 2019 at $1.25 billion. So a lot of growth along the way, all within that world of private equity. And then Jeff's going to spend a little more time on some of the acquisitions as since 2015, I think we've done 14 acquisitions.
We've done 14 acquisitions since 2014.
Yeah.
11 of those have been since 2016.
Right.
So we've had a lot of activity. We closed on one a month ago. And the one we closed on a month ago, we didn't even physically touch the people. No handshake.
Yeah, that was a COVID acquisition.
It was totally virtual, from due diligence, from negotiation to all the management meetings, all the diligence meetings. And we're closing on one here in probably 2 more weeks. And we've known these people, and we've met with them a few years ago, but they weren't ready to sell. But we were able to fire up a sale process earlier this year, in the middle of COVID. In fact, it was in April. And we're closing again without actually, face-to-face discussions. A lot of Zoom, a lot of team calls, a lot of back and forth. But work is getting done through the acquisitions, all virtually. Mike talked about our organic growth. This is a down year for Appriss. Normally, we're growing 18 to 20% organically. This year, we're growing the single digits on the top line and double digits on the bottom line. So M&A is really important to our growth strategy. And because we have high recurring revenue, Mike mentioned the recurring revenue, about 94% of our revenue is recurring. And that gives us a lot of predictability and ability to put appropriate leverage on the business, because we have good consistency as far as what revenue is coming from year to year. And so, we carry a lot of debt, as most private equity companies do, but it also returns strong returns back to our investors as well as us. We're option holders. Mike and I are shareholders in the company as well. And the appropriate leverage is important as well.
I'll open that chat. We got a couple of questions.
Yeah, Jeff,
Yeah.
when you're, you have done so many acquisitions in such a short period of time. Question just came up in the chat about, the ability to effectively integrate them in that period of time. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we work with outside folks, obviously, to help us through the acquisition. But then when we close on the acquisition, or actually several weeks before we close on the acquisition, our internal teams start taking over the integration planning. And we're planning with the sellers as well. Because we are all operating virtual, including our partners that we're buying and our customers, the integration has not been difficult at all because everyone is used to being virtual. We actually have one of our business units, our Insights business unit, is in our Louisville office today, the leadership team yesterday and today, working on their integration and strat planning. We have the CEO of the company we just acquired last month here as well. So, for those of you on the call here, some of you may have been on airplanes. My first flight after almost 6 months was 3 weeks ago, and it was a glorious day getting back on an airplane instead of driving. But it's really easy. There's about 20% of people on the plane is also, it's easy to do that. So we're starting to see some more activity. Some of our salespeople are applying, and we're bringing some of the folks in that we're acquiring as well to help with integrations. But remember, we're in a data analytics business. It's virtual, and we don't need people, butts in seats to be able to keep the business going or to handle the integration as well.
The hardest part of integration is the cultural component, right? You can figure out how to who stays and who goes. And for the most part, the businesses we're buying, we're not having a lot of people synergy. We're not sending a lot of people on their way. We're keeping the team. And it's about getting them quickly to feel like they're part of something different and not just letting them continue to run and feel like they're just connected lightly. And so we spend a lot of time up front announcing, selling the culture, getting them a delivery package, making them feel a part of Appriss. And that's the hardest part. And we've gotten better at it. I don't think we did that very well a few years ago. We're getting better at it. We've got our HR team, working a lot on that. There's also a question about COVID-related work. We've done a little bit. We've not launched this in a big way, but we've got a product that helps in substance abuse doctors figure out where they can get treatment for addicted, patients. And it looks at all the available inventory of treatment facilities and who matches up with that patient, both from a standpoint of what their needs are and their insurance and everything else, and helps them place those people. And we've redirected that in one state so that they could use that to manage that platform to keep track of all their resources. So think about ventilators and PPE and things that they're trying to balance around their state. And so we've done a little bit of that, but we have not, that's not a major thing we've done. We've done that more to help a few of our states who have asked us to step up, and we've done that.
Rick, you also had a question about integration. Some of the things we do really well is we rip the Band-Aid off fast.
Yeah.
So we're changing bank accounts immediately. We're changing billing systems, accounting systems. They're all coming onto our platforms immediately within 30-day period. Employees are onto our benefits, onto our platforms. They all have new laptops within usually a matter of days. So, there's other things that we've moved slower as far as, transition of communications to customers and things like that. As far as the employees to get to the right culture, we put them into the Appriss, workflow immediately. And then everything else flows from there.
I think there's, go ahead, Brad.
Maybe talk a little bit about just the targeting process that you all use. How do you go about identifying the ideal candidates and then the screening process to that extent?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. One, we're at a point today where we have these very large investor partners who have teams of people that are so plugged in and scouring every private company in the world, right? And they have people that are just keeping tabs on things. So they often funnel targets to us and say, hey, this looks something that could be an Appriss business. So we get some that way, but I would say most of what we buy, we're finding through the business, right? We're either finding companies that we're working with or partnering with, and
most of them are not in the process.
And the majority are not in the process. Generally, when our investors find them, it's because they're coming to market, right? And we don't. While we've done that, I think we bought 3 companies maybe out of the process out of those 14. Look, it just is a whole different environment. I mean, when you're just showing up to a process to try to buy a company, there's a couple things you're going to walk away from. You're going to know you're going to pay the highest price anybody's willing to pay. That's any auction, right? And the second is your ability to learn and make decisions on an acquisition get very tightly time compressed, because that thing has a beginning and an end, and it's going to happen in a matter of weeks. And so the amount of comfort you get with making that bet is low, right? If you haven't already been involved with that company. So our preferred approach is to find companies we've known for a while, we've worked with, we've partnered with, and kind of nurture them as a relationship towards an acquisition. And we've been really successful doing that. And it isn't always about getting them at a good value. I think you generally are going to have to pay close to a market price no matter what, because people are sophisticated. But you have more time to get your thesis for that acquisition checked out, right? And so we tend to be looking for them internally. We're going to our market teams and constantly asking them. We maintain a pipeline of acquisition targets at all times. Jeff, Krish, used to be me, but now Jeff, Krish, and the team review that list on a weekly basis, really. And some of them we have to park over here. They're just not actionable now. But the ones that we are making progress on, we're pushing people to keep those conversations going and try to grow that.
Any given day, we probably have a half dozen acquisitions that we're in active discussions with. We're doing work around. And to Mike's point, some of those fall off the list and come back on, 6 months later as well.
M&A is just one more sales pipeline for us. We think of it as the other sales pipeline. You've got your pipeline for your products you're managing. You got your pipeline.
Another thing that's really important, especially as we're looking at smaller companies, your companies that are under $25, $30 million of revenue, The founders of the company are really looking for a home for their employees and their customers. They're looking for the right culture, how we operate together, how we treat the customers, how we treat the employees. So culture plays a big part in why we win a lot of these bids.
Yeah, in fact, there are options if you think about it. If you're that entrepreneur who owns your company, you've built it up to 10, 15, 20 million in revenue, you're on people's radar in that private equity market. But your move is one of two things. You're either going to bring in a majority controlled partner, and now you've got some board. That's kind of scary to a lot of these founders. Or you're going to bring in a minority partner, and only if you have a really strong business are you going to do that, right? Something so coveted that these guys will go minority. I mean, they do, but they don't like it. And then what we represent is a middle ground, and we position Appriss as we're a home for really cool entrepreneurs. When we buy companies, we can point you to all these entrepreneurs that are still at Appriss who started their companies, and they're still here today being entrepreneurs. And that is an attractive sales pitch if you're the guy who's just trying to figure out how to keep getting bigger, but you don't want to go home, right? You want to just keep seeing your company grow.
And to that end, we've allowed some of our founders to roll some of their stock into Appriss as well. So they get a piece of the upside as they continue helping build the company.
Yeah.
Chris, you asked a really good question. How do you manage going private equity versus the venture capital route, and what advice would you give a company who's raising capital today? What we have found is we've and this really applies to the debt markets because we're in the debt markets constantly with acquisitions, and just it's a very favorable debt market right now in a lot of respects, is really the predictability of your business. So private equity is looking for the same thing you are, is you have the predictability and reduced risk around the business. So the more that you can show the history of your business, how you've performed through good times and bad, how much control you have around the pipeline, how control you have around as far as your revenue stream, that's all really important. And then there's a ton of money out there, both in venture capital and private equity. So you don't always want to go with the first person who comes knocking at your door. You want to look and see what the right culture is, and how they think about your business, how much of an expertise are they in your business, because you don't want just money. You need the intellectual capital that they bring as well. What can you do to help you grow your business, help you diversify your business? And not all money is the same. And because there's so much in the market right now, you really have a lot of control over what your options are. So, be careful who you're talking with, because it's a marriage, and you want to make sure that it's right for you. It's not just the best valuation or the best dollar coming in. You want to, what are they going to do to help you grow the business?
The other thing I'll point out is what happened to Appriss day one. I don't know if it's very easy to replicate today. We really were lucky, and I'll tell you why. Chrysalis was brand new in Louisville. And keep in mind, Chrysalis was the Jones family and the Cobb family. And they had I think they had a $6 million fund, right? 6. And this is in mid-1990s. And they were and they were studying the model of being a private equity or growth equity or venture type investors, but they were doing it with family money, and their investment in us was a $350,000 check. And we had guys who were smart guys who had connections to building big businesses that helped us go from there, right? It's hard to find that model now because nobody writes a $350,000 check out of a private equity group, right? So Chrysalis, the fact that they were new and we were coming along at the same time was a really good thing for us and them, I think. We gave them a great return as well. What I see today happening is small entrepreneurs that start, their first money, they go to angels and they go get a cap table with 30 people on it, putting up $50,000. And they get a little bit trapped there because with Chrysalis, they were serious. If we were going to put more capital in, they had a way to do it, and we could keep building on our success. When you get yourself into that position, sometimes it's hard to take that next step where you go get that institutional money to put a big round in. You got to find out how you're going to go from that friends and family round or that angel round to get into that private equity. And ultimately, you just got to prove you can grow. And it's not about, saying, hey, we can write a nice plan that's going to show this hockey stick. Every plan that's ever written is a hockey stick. And I've never seen one of them that work out that way, including the ones we grow, right? Things don't go as planned. So what they want to invest in are in entrepreneurs who are going to have that special ability to fight through and make decisions and make changes and find a way to grow, right? And that I personally believe those entrepreneurs are born, because it is as much instinctual as it is experience to know, that there's a fine balance between giving up on something too quick and riding it into the ground, right? And knowing when it's time to make that shift, that change. David Jones Sr. Told me very early for us, he said, look, the thing that lets you grow is we were a, Humana, we were a nursing home company, and then we became a hospital company, and then we became an insurance company. And he said those transitions didn't happen because you have to have a lot of guts when you make those kind of changes, and the timing and how you do them is really critical. And that was impressed on us very early on. It's never going to go like you planned, so it's all about betting on people who can figure out how to win when that surprise shows up.
Hey, Larry, you asked a good question. We get this question from our investors. We went through a roadshow last year when Clear Lake came in, and Mike and Christian and I met with 37 different private equity firms.
Yeah,
so it was a tightly run process. I'm being facetious. So, that's the next question is, what's our next vertical? What's our next platform? So I'll tell you, the other two platforms we got into outside the government space on the left side of your screen there, those were not planned. Those were just natural progressions as opportunities came out. So we don't know what our next vertical will be. It's a great question. We get it all the time. We're thinking about it, but it's just going to organically happen as we see a market opportunity, as we see an acquisition opportunity that maybe is aligned with what Appriss does, but it doesn't fit tightly with one of the other three verticals. We might get into that as well.
Now, there's a lot of opportunities out there. Financial services is a market we look at, real estate, different ones that could use some of our data. So we're looking at it. It'll probably be an acquisition. We'll probably find an opportunity to find something that's already at some level of scale and open up a new market. That would be my guess.
I think that next question is a good question for both of you all from an ecosystem standpoint. You talked about the challenges of, shifting from friends and family all the way through the institutional capital process. What insights or recommendations would you give?
What I would tell you is I would seek out those more institutional funds as early as you can and get on their radar. And that means, like, for example, there's some institutional type funds in Louisville now. There's a fund Poplar Ventures has out. There's some others. I'm actually an LP in that one. But, find out who those, I'd get into that ecosystem. I'd network and find out who runs those types of funds, who is investing in early stage money, and just meet with them and talk to them about your business and get on their radar, right? So that when you do call on them a year, 2 years down the road, you've already got a bit of a connection with them and they've followed you a little bit. But you may not be ready for them to invest in. Look, if you've got $300,000 in revenue and you're growing, but you still are, pretty early stage, you just may not be ready for that type of investment. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't be out talking to them and getting on their radar screen so that when you are ready, you can get there. But the biggest thing that causes consternation, I think, for entrepreneurs in this first step is, this idea of selling a majority interest. And we had that problem, right? When Chrysalis vested in us, if you recall, $350,000, bought them a third. And a year later, we needed more capital, and myself and my partner had no money left. We had leveraged everything we had. We had to put some more capital in, and that got us down. We did all the math where we could stay at 49 or 51, and they could stay at 49. Right? We did all that dance, and eventually, you got to decide: are you trying to make your business as successful as you can, or are you trying to keep control of it? Right? It's the entrepreneur's most fundamental dilemma. And, in fact, there were two of us and we weren't even in agreement. 5 years in, we had built a nice business and we could have just kept building it at the pace we could build it. It'd be a nice business. But, one of us wanted to grow faster and one of us was not really wanting to give up control. And we really had to grapple with that. If you just need to be clear if that, early on, are you ready to grow the biggest business you can? Because if you are, you're coming out of control. It's just a matter of when. And the fear is, I'm going to come out of control and these evil investors are going to fire me and take my company over, right? Well, they won't if you do a good job. I mean, my point about that is I've had lots of investors in my business. I've had, a dozen private equity groups and we've found nothing but great people who are really smart and been great at helping us grow this business. But But there were times where, you know, you might think you're getting pushed around, but you need to stop and ask yourself, should you be listening to them, right? Because they're smart and they've got a lot of looks at the market that you're in. And, you know, they don't want to run your company, I'll tell you that. But if you're not running it very well, they are willing to come and bring somebody else in to do it. And you just got to decide, are you all in to build the biggest company you want? Because if you can't answer that question honestly, you don't belong there. You just need to commit yourself, I'm going to grow the biggest business I can control, right? And those are two very, very different things. If Young and I had wanted to maintain 51 and never bring that other bit of capital in, I'm convinced we'd have a nice business. It'd be a 10 or $20 million business maybe that's doing a couple of products. And I see those are the kinds of companies we go out and buy, right? Because they're companies that we just haven't, they're just never been able to really get broke free for scale. So you got to decide, are you wanting to own a smaller piece of a bigger pie or a bigger piece of a smaller pie? And it's no more complicated.
And that is
than
a difficult process to go through. So when Mike and Young were going through that process in 99 and 2000,
Yeah.
I was across the table as their CFO.
It was gut
And
wrenching.
it was gut wrenching because we're managing the growth of the business, managing the cash flow. They're managing how they want to look at the business and how fast do we grow. And so it affects the whole company. So, but it's something to not take lightly as well. So if you're in that mode, you want to talk to your other investors and your partners and your family as far as what path you want to go down.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs would struggle with this question, but maybe you're not the best CEO for your business, right? And if you're not, as an investor and an owner in that business, shouldn't you want the best CEO, right? And it just depends along that way. You may be great till you're a $20 million company and then you're not, right? And that's just something entrepreneurs struggle with because we tend to think we can do anything, right? And you know, you need to realize that we all have our limits. I think it's the reason I was here 25 years is because I pretty quickly learned I love doing a few things really well. I was all about product and market. I liked it. And I just got really comfortable with going out and hiring smart people to do everything else and knowing that, you know, they're going to do that better than me. And, you know,
the other thing that helps
that's
in
good.
this process is you start bringing other investors is that's also an opportunity for you to take some chips off the table. So throughout the 25-year history of the business, Mike is, through each transaction, has taken a little bit of cash off the table each time, but then rolled it, the rest of it, and then taken some chips off the next time and rolled even more. So that's an opportunity for you to, you know, get some liquidity, take some risk off the table, you know, help your personal financial situation, but then still reinvest and grow back into the business as well.
Right, right.
Maybe
So
I was, I was going to point you to that question, Jeff. With all the talk, you know, that's going on in the city and today's press release that came out with Papa John's and some of their changes, you know, Lisa's got a great question. You know, your employee bases, there's a lot of virtual nature to that. And so what's kept you tethered to Louisville as a home base?
I got to tell you, why we're in Louisville is because we were founded in Louisville. And I think it's super important for Louisville to foster young companies to grow here because that's the strongest tether you have. Companies as they grow are going to either, if they're private or if they go public, you know, they got lots, they'll have a diverse investor group and ownership structure over time if they keep scaling. And the reason Humana's in Louisville is because David and Wendell were in Louisville. The reason Appriss is in Louisville is we started here, right? And I think
400 employees here in Louisville. Out of our 1,000 employees, there's 400 of them here. So we have a strong presence here. We, you know, the building that we lease here, we have a long-term lease here. We lease 6 floors in the building. We have options for 2 more with growth. You know, we've got over 100 people in Europe, but the rest of the folks are in the United States. We get absolutely zero pressure from our investors to go somewhere else. The cost of living is phenomenal here in Louisville. The lifestyle is phenomenal here. We're able to hire the talent. Now, your question about data science, we have some of the data scientists here in Louisville, but most of them are based in our California office in Irvine, Orange County. We've had 3 people move from Orange County to Louisville because they actually wanted to buy a house that was more than 1,000 square feet and have a yard and 3-car garage and all that.
I would say, though, that Louisville's attractive. I mean, if people, everybody from Louisville knows this, it's a great place to have a family and everything, right? And companies who start here are most likely going to anchor here. We're going to have a way easier time growing good businesses here than we will attracting companies to come here. You know, it's a competitive thing to do. And my thing is what keeps you tethered here is having those local roots. But look, that's up to our community to keep these companies feeling valued and to keep the Louisville as a city feeling like a great place people want to live. And our state being positive in terms of helping companies grow and having a pro-business culture. And, you know, if we don't do those things, even companies like Papa John's eventually drift away. I mean, and you know, it's a risk we have. I think our best bet to build great companies in Louisville is to start them in Louisville. That's my view.
We're going to use that as kind of the final word. And
Yeah.
guys, we appreciate your time and
Sure.
sharing your passion and a bit of the story. It's been an incredible story of what Appriss has done from the early days to today. And there's more to come, I know of.
Yeah,
So
more to
we'll
come.
have you back in 5 years and learn more about, you know, the next journeys with private equity and the future M&A. So again, on behalf of ACG, I appreciate the time, and I'm going to kick it back to Matt to wrap us up.
Great. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks again, guys. And thanks for everybody joining us for our first meeting of the fiscal year. And we'll look forward to having everybody back here next month for Deal of the Year, and info should be going out on that shortly. Thanks again, Jeff and Mike, for joining us today.
You bet.
You bet.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank you.